Hello, thank you for joining us today. Uh, Today we're going to talk about how to create persistent environments with Run AI, and we'll be using Conda/Mamba and also Jupyter Lab. So let's get started. So we had this specific question that we get from clients a lot, and it goes something like this. Clients will say, okay, I think I understand Docker and Docker images, but does this mean that I have to create, a Docker image for every single one of my environments? And of course, we respond, well, that's the preferred thing to do. But of course, the follow-up question is, is there a way I can create and save environments on the fly like I do in my normal workflow? And of course, the answer to that is yes. And so that's what we'll be showing you how to do today. So a little bit of Conda background, because we use Conda and Mamba extensively in this example. When Conda is installed, it creates a directory to keep its files. Sometimes this directory is called Conda, sometimes it's called Anaconda, sometimes it's called Mini Conda. But the point is, there's a folder that has all the stuff that Conda is required, to function. And whenever you create a Conda environment, it creates a folder inside of this called envs, which stands for environments. And within that environments folder, it will create another folder with your environment and all that is needed for that particular environment. And so the idea is to create a folder called envs in your persistent NFS, and then just mount that as a volume into your image and point it to the environments folder under the Conda directory within your image. Make sense? So a quick note about Jupyter. A lot of people like to have tiles for their environments. This way they can also switch the kernels on a particular notebook. And so these settings are saved in a folder called Kernels. So similarly, if we wanted to create these tiles and persist them, make them permanent, we could create a folder called kernels in our NFS, in our persistent storage, and then just mount that to the kernels folder inside of our image. Now, just just FYI, this is the process. These are the commands that you would basically use to create these tiles up here. So whenever you create your environment, the important thing is to install ipykernel. Ipykernel is required to have these tiles and to be able to switch environments within your notebook. And then once you've got that installed in your environment, you're going to want to activate the environment itself. And then you have to run this command, which is python m ipykernel install --user --name, and then you're going to put your environment. And then you're going to refresh the web browser, and you should be able to see your tile up here. Now, if for any reason you ever wanted to remove these tiles, this is the command you would run to remove that tile. A note about the Docker image. The Docker image that we're going to be using is this base notebook root image, and we'll talk a little bit more about this asterisk. So it's a slightly modified version of the official Jupyter base notebook image. And you can find, all of the information about this particular custom image on the GitHub. And so all of our Jupyter images are based off the official Jupyter Docker images. Now, the thing is that the official images don't run with root privileges by default. Now, in order to successfully mount the kernels and environment folders into Jupyter Lab, root privileges are required. And so we created a custom image that runs root by default. And you can see the differences on the GitHub. There's not that many. There's a few lines of code. All right. And so here are the steps. First, we're going to create the environments and kernels folder in our persistent NFS. Then we're going to mount those folders into a Jupyter Lab job. We're going to create our environment, and then we're going to go ahead and test our environment. So the first step to create the environment and kernels folders, we're just going to start an interactive job. And we'll just use any image. We'll use a Jupyter-based notebook, make sure that the Jupyter flag is on. And here's the important part, into the work directory. So this stays the same. You want to point your NFS folder. And then once we do that, if we open up the notebook and we go into the work directory, you should see all of your folders and files. And then we'll want to select the new folder icon 2 times to create 2 new folders. And we want to make sure that we title those folders envs and kernels. And once that is done, we can go ahead and delete the job. So let's actually go ahead and do that now. Oh, just base notebook. And then we just have to make sure we're mounting our NFS onto that work directory. So we'll go ahead and submit that. And then we'll just wait for this job to start running. And then we'll be able to connect to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect to that job. So if we go into our work directory, we can see our files, and we'll just go ahead and click this, create the environments folder, and then we'll create the kernels folder. And now that we've got both of these, we can just go ahead and delete this job. Perfect. Okay. And so step 2 is we're going to create a new job where we're actually going to mount our environment and kernels folder. So very similarly interactive, but this time we're going to use that base notebook -root image that we talked about. Jupyter flag is on, and there'll be several things that we have to mount. So one is the usual. We have to mount into the work directory our NFS. That's what we always do. And second, into the kernels folder of the image, which is this thing over here on the right, we're going to mount that kernels folder that we just created. And then into the environments folder, Conda environments folder of the image, we're going to mount that environments folder that we just created here. And once we do that, we can go ahead and submit the job. So let's go ahead and do that. So here, base notebook root, and in our storage, we will see that we've got the work directory mounted here. We have kernels over here, and we have the environments over here. So we'll just go ahead and submit that and wait for this to finish running. Okay, now we're good. So let's go ahead and connect. And perfect, everything is there. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and create our environment. So we're going to connect to a terminal. So we're going to start a terminal window, and then we're going to create our environment using the following format. So we use mamba create. We'll name our environment, and we have to make sure we put ipykernel, and then, of course, all of our libraries. So this is what our command will look like. We're creating this environment called pandas-env, and we're going to install ipykernel, pandas, and tabulate. Now, once we do that, we're going to wait for the environment to finish creating. So just a fair warning, this executing transaction step normally takes, 2 seconds maybe. However, because we are using an NFS to create our environment, the files are being stored sort of elsewhere. And so this step is going to take a little bit longer, especially if you have a slow NFS, which I happen to have one. So this particular step took about 3 minutes for me. Now, once we do that, we can activate the environment. And once we activate it, then we just run our command to install the kernel so we can have the tile, which looks like this. And then we can just exit the terminal. And once we refresh the browser, we should be able to see the new environment visible, and we should also be able to select the environment from a dropdown in an existing notebook. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll start a terminal, and we will do okay. All right, now when it starts executing transaction, I'm actually going to start this timer over here just to show you. All right. Now, like I said, this takes a while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording right now, and then I'll come back after it's finished, but I will leave this time running so you can see. Okay, so this took, like I said, a little over 3 minutes, so about 3 minutes. And now we can just go ahead and resume our workflow. So Conda activate. All right, and then we're going to run our, actually, let me go ahead and clear this. Okay, so we've activated pandas, and now let's run our command, which is Python m I kernel install user name equals pandas environment. And now that that's done, we just exit. And notice that it's not here yet. We just have to refresh the browser here, and we'll see it pop up here. And there it is. And so now that it's there, we can also, for example, open up a notebook that we've got. And right now it's just using the default kernel. So this line will not work because we don't have pandas installed, no module named pandas. But now we can actually switch over to the pandas environment that we created. Select that. And if we import, we will import that successfully, as we can see. So let's just go ahead and switch that back. Now, what's nice is this environment and this kernel is now installed in our persistent storage. So if we wanted to, I'll go through an example of this. We could delete this job here. And then we can start a new one. And as long as we are mounting that kernels folder and that environments folder, we will have access to all of those folders or all of those environments that we have created. So let's just go ahead and wait for that to start up. Okay. Oh, I guess I connected too soon. Yep, just give it a second. Okay, now we're good. And we can see the pandas environment here. So if we wanted to, let's go ahead and create a notebook, and you'll notice the pandas environment here. So if we go ahead and do an import pandas as PD, we run that runs successfully. And if we switch to the normal one. We'll notice that, of course, it will not run because there's no module named pandas in the ordinary base environment. Okay. And so now let's test this. So let's assume I've got this Python script here called persist environment demo.py. And the only thing I'm doing here is just creating a data frame and then printing it out. I'm saying this is a pandas data frame and then printing out the data frame. And so after we mount our NFS folder to the work directory, it's going to be under projects, under persist environment demo, and here is our script. And so the CLI command that we want to run looks like this run AI submit with all of these arguments. So let's just quickly go through the important ones. So one is the image. We want to use that base notebook dash root image that we've been using. Second, we want to make sure that we're mounting our NFS to the work directory. Third, we want to mount that environments folder. Very important. And then, of course, we want to mount the kernels folder as well. And then here in this particular segment, what we're telling the image to do is to run a command. So run a command within the Conda environment named pandas-environment. And the command that we'll be running is this one right here. We'll use Python to run our script, persist environment demo.py, which is under persist environment demo, under projects. Yeah. And so we'll just run that in the CLI and we'll see a new job pop up in our job list. And once that is actually finished, we should be able to go to the logs and see this is the pandas data frame and the data frame printed. So let's go ahead and try that out. So here's our command. Just going to copy this and paste it here. And it says waiting for job to be created. Okay, so successfully created. So if we go here, here is our job, persist environment O. And so we'll just wait for this to finish. It's running now. And it should become, oh, there it is, succeeded. And if we go to our logs, this is a pandas data frame, and here is the data frame printout. And that is all. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope this was useful.